Hi, I'm Gran, and we're going down the rabbit hole of my dad, William Terry Wells. Some of his memories, including some of his World War II memories. Public service had been part of my dad's life since he was a little kid. His father, Rube, began working for the sheriff of Cochise County, Arizona, when Dad was about 3. First as a jailer and later as a field and range deputy. Part of being a jailer was to sit up with the departed, a custom at the time. Since Grandpa was the jailer, he was the one that got to stay up with them. He shared his most memorable experience while sitting up with the dead. The departed was on a table in one room, and Grandpa was in the other room where he could see the departed through the doorway. In the middle of the night, while Grandpa was reading, out of the corner of his eye, he detected movement. He slowly turned and watched as the departed slowly sat up and remained sitting. He stared, watched, trying to decide what to do next. He never admitted to being scared, but there were lots of thoughts racing through his brain. Was the body going to get up and walk away? He continued to observe the sitting departed for a while. He then noticed that some of the weights had shifted. A dead body often changes position during the decomposition process, which is why several chains, heavy chains with weights on either side, were draped across the body. He then went over to the body and adjusted the weights and was happy to report the departed remained flat for the rest of his shift. I grew up listening to my dad sharing stories about growing up in Sulphur Springs Valley and sometimes about World War II. My mom would share stories of growing up in eastern Oklahoma. They were especially talkative when we were sitting around the campfire. One night, our family and some of Dad's brothers had gathered for a hunting camping trip in the Chiricahua Mountains. All the kids had been put to bed, which meant Dad would lay out a large tarp, and on one side he would layer camping quilts that my mom had made. We would lay down, he would pile more camping quilts on top, then fold the tarp over us so that it would keep the dew off as we slept. Many a night I fell asleep while thousands of stars twinkled above. The best way to fall asleep. Anyway, the adults had gathered around the fire visiting, and I could hear my dad and uncles sharing their stories of their experiences during World War II. This night, I'm thinking I was probably 7 or 8 years old. What I heard was upsetting, surprising, shocking, and I could tell some of them were upset as they shared by how they halted, kind of cleared their throats, waiting before they continued. Later, when I was married, my dad came for a visit, and my husband and he were sitting at the kitchen table while I was upstairs putting the kids to bed. As I was coming down the stairs, I could hear Dad quietly talking, and I felt compelled to stop, sit down on the stairs, and listen. The bases where Dad flew out of during World War II were in southern England. He was sharing a rather traumatic experience of a fellow pilot who crash-landed when returning from a mission. The scene Dad was describing was really gruesome. Everyone helped the pilot out of the wreckage and laid him on the tarmac. When the pilot tried to stand, he saw that there were only stumps where his legs had been. He and everyone was covered with his blood. He was Dad's friend. He didn't make it. Another experience was about a friend in my dad's squadron. They were returning from one of their missions, and when they were over the English Channel, it was announced over the radio to everyone the successful births of my dad's twin daughters and his friend's baby. That experience seemed to create an additional bond between these friends, sharing how they met their wives, how much they missed them, anxious to get home to see their babies, and what their plans were after the war. Dad described the last time he flew with his friend, who was also a pilot. As they were returning from another mission, flying over the English Channel back to their base, he watched as his friend's plane was shot down, landing in the water, wreckage everywhere, and no survivors could be seen. There was nothing he could do but report the crash. He never got over the heartache of losing his friend. Whenever Dad shared this story, he would tear up because he was able to watch his daughters grow up, knowing his friend wasn't able to. I came to understand that it was important to my dad and my uncles to protect their loved ones from the more upsetting realities of war. My dad died when he was 75 years young. It is once you lose someone, questions start flooding. So many questions with no one to ask for the answers. Several years after my dad died, my sister requested his military records. She contacted the National Personnel Records Center in Missouri. In December of 2004, she received a response including very few documents and an explanation of a fire destroying Dad's records, most of Dad's records. On July 12, 1973, shortly after midnight, which is a curiosity in itself, there was a fire at the National Personnel Records Center. The first firefighters arrived within 5 minutes of the alarm, but the fire lasted 22 hours and required 42 fire districts to put it out. There was no clear reason for the cause of the fire. It is believed it was a combination of human error and an electrical short. It is estimated between 16 and 18 million official military personnel files were destroyed. It is estimated 75% of the records for Air Force veterans discharged between September 1947 and January 1964 were destroyed, with surnames starting with Hubbard to the end of the alphabet. The lost documents would have provided more details of my dad's experiences during the war. What was shared with us were those official documents that had been duplicated for medals earned and pay records kept at the National Archives and Records Administration, the NARA, located in Washington, D.C. It was a copy of one of these documents we received that we discovered Dad had earned 4 bronze medals and 2 oak leaf clusters. How these medals were earned or any details were not included. This required me to be a bit of an investigator, trying to match the stories Dad and family members shared with historical documents of the 101st Airborne to determine how he earned those bronze medals. So what is a hero? What does it mean to be a hero? Are we all capable of being a hero? One thing I do know about a hero is they never draw your attention to their great deed or deeds. Many go to their graves, like my dad, without sharing. Often they are more concerned about their friends who didn't make it, suffering what I believe as survivor guilt. Why me and not them? I will share in more videos what I have learned. I would also suggest watching the mini-series Band of Brothers, who was part of the 101st Airborne. Thanks for joining me, and please join me again when Granny goes down the rabbit hole. Thank you.